And, I think the council was asking me for my immediate kind of like, what are you seeing? What do you think? And I shared that I thought that the staff was understaffed in a few key areas. And the feedback I got was people saw that as well. And also, when I was going through the recruitment process, several council members had expressed a willingness to add an additional position to the administration or community development department. So I guess that's all to say. I think we're all on kind of the same page that there's a need. Overall, the city eliminated 11 FTE positions and added 6.25 positions, most of which were at a lower pay grade, for a net reduction of almost 5 positions from mid-2018 to the end of 2021. So in a 2.5-year period, that was a reduction of 8% of the city's staff. And that's a sizable reduction. The workload didn't reduce by 8% over those same years. And in a lot of ways, the workload's gotten more complex. We're adding a lot of households through redevelopment, so there are more residents to serve. So again, I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't know, that there's a need out there. So the department directors and I, we've had some really in-depth conversations about staffing needs. And we all agree that there's a need to evaluate the long term. And we don't want to be in a hurry to do that. We want to take our time and make sure we're giving you some good proposals. We also don't know exactly how we would fund some of those long-term things. So we want to wait until the 2023 budget discussion to talk about the longer-term staffing needs. But what we do want to talk about are some needs in 2022, or in the case of the finance department, really a need in 2021, because it's been sitting out there as a unfilled position. So the immediate needs are a reorganization of our finance department, the addition of a police officer to meet needs arising from turnover and leaves, a community development and/or community services director, and then evaluating a couple of positions to make sure we've got them properly placed in the pay scale. In terms of the finance department, the former accountant resigned from their position in November, and so for those 4 or 5 months, the finance department has been operating short-staffed. Those are really a critical 4 or 5 months in terms of doing all the year-end work that needs to be done. And so Dan and his team have really stepped up and been working kind of over and above for sure. And I think everybody recognizes that. Director Winnick evaluated his staff structure in the fall, and based on the needs of the department and the recommendations of our auditors, he's been advocating a restructuring since late last year. I think even before I started, Director Winnick was telling me about what his ideas were, and so this is something he's put a lot of thought into. And he really wants to make sure that we're allowing for redundancies and cross-training and job responsibilities. And Dan said he wanted me to kind of take some of this on. Are you sure? You want me to hand this off to you? All right. Allowing for redundancies and cross-training in job responsibilities to better accommodate variances in the needs of the community, to have adequate backup in the case of absences or staff turnover, improving in accounting and financing processes and internal controls, aiding in succession planning, and helping to retain excellent staff that we have and better attract new employees. So this year's approved budget does include the position of accountant. Director Winnick believes that the needs of the organization and the community would be better served by expanding the roles of several existing positions. Instead of hiring a new accountant, the recommendation is to reclassify 2 existing positions. They're a G7 and a G8, a senior building technician and a utility building coordinator, as 2 G10, grade 10 finance accounting coordinator positions. And when the employees currently filling those roles move up, they leave vacancies behind them. A couple people move up into those, and they leave vacancies behind them, and one person moves up into that, and one would get filled externally. So all of this would be able to be implemented without any increase to the net number of personnel, or without any increases to the personnel expenditures that were approved in the budget. So it's a budget neutral and maybe even a budget positive step that allows us to have the tools that the finance department needs. With the police department, the city council did approve one additional sergeant and one additional part-time CSO in 2021, but it's been nearly impossible to achieve actual staffing levels that were intended or that allow the police department to safely provide the level of service that's needed in the community. And I think I keep walking by something that just reminds me of this over and over and over again. Right out on the wall there's the pictures of all the police departments, or police officers, and there's frames for everybody. We've never had pictures while I've been here in all those frames because of the turnover, because of people out for various reasons. And we want to make sure there's pictures in all the frames is kind of what it comes down to. We've got the positions. Just by circumstances, we're never able to fill them all. And by adding one additional police department, we feel like we can get at fully staffed and give me a second. We can get fully staffed in a way that is we can accommodate in the budget. There were budget savings in 2021. I don't like the word surplus, but that's the only word I can come up with at the time. For 2021, there was our expenditures were less than we expected, and our revenues were either greater than expected or they offset in a way that we came out ahead. And so we are able to use 2021 savings to help fund this additional police officer. I'm recommending that it be, I'm calling it an augmentation of our police force, and that it would be in place for the entirety of 2022, and that we reevaluate it as part of the 2023 budget process. It could be very well that we say, let's keep doing this while there's funding available and while there's a need. On the other hand, the police department could completely stabilize. We could get people in, have them stay in place, hopefully have fewer people out with injuries, and stabilize the police department to where the chief may feel more comfortable with the staffing levels. So if we did conclude that we no longer needed the position for those reasons, we would eliminate a position. Now, we wouldn't eliminate this new hire. We would eliminate a position through attrition, meaning that in 2023 or beyond, when a police officer were to retire on their own volition or resign and move to a different place, we just wouldn't fill the position. I think that helps meet the needs that Chief Babenroth sees. I don't think that it meets all of his hopes and goals. And we did attach a study that the chief wanted to share with you. And I don't know if you want to tag onto that a little bit about the future.
Yeah, just a couple of things. So one additional police officer would help in the immediate, where we're hoping to have 4 officers on each shift, on each team. We currently don't have that. With the addition of 1 police officer, we'd be able to have 4 across the board. So all days and nights, we have 4 on each team. So that's 3 officers and 1 sergeant to make up that 4. We currently don't in our staffing model. I don't know if you saw that staffing breakdown that I included in my not so short write-up for everyone. But 1 would get us, so 19 authorized would give us 4 on each team, day and night. And then I would also hope that looking forward, we have 2 more additional officers, one as a backup to our current one investigator, because they're currently operating where we're seeing increase of caseloads that they've got since 2016. And at the end of the day, if there's only one person in that position, that means that that one investigator has a tough time taking a vacation, because the work doesn't go away when they're on vacation. It just piles up. So they know that they can't truly enjoy their time away, knowing that it works to their benefit to get back sooner so they don't have a growing pile of work to do. And the caseload that our investigator is seeing being increasing for the past couple of years, it makes sense for us to be able to take a more proactive approach on the investigation side by having a second investigator. Third one that I would hope to bring on eventually is a community service officer, a dedicated police officer that is their sole responsibility and is getting out into the community and doing presentations for crime prevention, and then also helping us out for vacation relief on the street to reduce overtime. But those are the hopefully not too long-term of goals that I would have. So 3 is really the total number, but 1 in the immediate. As City Manager Stark said, if we had 1 more, we'd be able to round out each team at 4 officers, days and nights.
I'm kind of hearing conflicting. So in the near future, I mean, we'd hire 1
Correct.
for the 2022.
Yep.
But in the future, you're thinking hiring 2 more.
2 more would be,
The
that would put us in a great
3
place.
budget. And I think that's discussion that we would have
Yep.
in
Down the
summer or
road.
whatever. But for right now, we're looking at the 1 position.
Correct.
And then discussion this summer with the budget, you'll be recommending possibly 2.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I said, the department directors, we sat down and discussed this as a group, and I think there are going to be needs everywhere. And I'm sure there are going to have to be compromises. You know, you can't always get what you want, as they say. Hopefully we can. It'd be nice if we could, but we would like to come to you kind of in a more holistic way later in the year and say, here are the longer term needs and the resources we would need to fill those. So we'll get there, and that's why the other department directors are here, is to kind of support that, that they are fine with having a more limited discussion tonight about 2022, but they're looking forward to having a broader discussion about the future years. The other piece in the police department, we do have a position currently, I think the title is Police Administrative Assistant, but they manage and administer all of the records, and it's a really sought-after position by police forces all over the metro. And we believe they're performing job functions that exceed the job specification, the job description. So we'd like to we'd like to review the job description, review the pay for that, and we would look to kind of an outside consultant to help us look at that, to make sure it's appropriately placed. We want to retain, we want to be paying the right prices for the right services and retain our employees. So that's something we would look at. In terms of community development or community services, since 2018, the combined staffing for community development and administration has been cut by nearly 50%. The positions which were completely eliminated include a community development director, a community services director, and a parks and recreation coordinator. The responsibilities of some other positions which were eliminated during the past 4 years have been outsourced to consultants, including our building inspector, a planning technician, and our communications coordinator. The result of the staff elimination and contraction is that the city manager is now effectively the department director of administration, community development, and community services. And I don't feel like I can adequately manage all those functions and that many direct reports. I currently have 9 direct reports in a manner that allows the community to grow and evolve in the ways that I'm hearing that you and the community members envision. So I'm proposing that we add the position of Community Development or Community Services Director. Among the responsibilities of the position would be to supervise the community development staff, which is planning, zoning, and building inspections, to manage long-range planning in conjunction with our WSB planning staff, to assist the EDA Executive Director in managing redevelopment projects and business assistance programming, to assist the HRA Executive Director, and so just to be clear, the EDA and HRA Executive Director is me, to assist in creating and managing housing programming, and to assist the city manager and community development staff in creating, implementing, and managing recreation programs kind of in the near term. We'll address the far term again when we talk about the budget. Several of our peer cities with population counts close to ours do have a community development director, including Little Canada, Mounds View, and Vadnais Heights. My recommendation would be that the position be at a grade 18. Currently, our department directors vary from grade 18 to grade 23, with a starting salary range of $102,000 to $112,000 plus benefits. Since the position would do work associated with the city, planning, zoning, and business inspections, the EDA, and the HRA, the recommendation is the funding would generally be a 50% EDA, 30% city, and 20% HRA. I would also recommend increasing the percentage of my time that's allocated to the EDA. The current allocation is 10%, and I would anticipate spending more time on EDA activities. So I would probably look at bumping mine up to more like 15% going toward the EDA, which would free up some of the general fund money that's spent on me. The EDA's been anticipating the addition of staff with unallocated funds of $107,000 in their 2022 budget, and the HRA budgeted approximately $47,000 for an unfilled position in the 2022 budget. An ongoing funding commitment from the general fund to cover the 30% of the employee's salary and benefits would need to be addressed as part of the future budget and levy considerations. We don't think that 30% would be burdensome enough to be a concern. When I talk about this position, you'll note I keep saying community development / community services and not one or the other. I'd want to have some flexibility in the naming of the position and the job responsibilities. And the reason for that is, every candidate has a different skill set, and I'd want to make sure whoever we hire, we're kind of capitalizing on their best skills. So if somebody came to us with a little more parks and recreation experience, we might tweak it a little bit, or if they come to us with a little more redevelopment experience. So I just want to be responsive to the people in the job market. And then finally, the deputy clerk and the city manager, deputy clerk / city manager executive assistant position. That position, which is held by Jenny Kloos, I've reviewed the responsibilities of that position, and I've determined that it's been conducting job responsibilities that exceed those that are in the job description. A lot of the responsibilities are human resources work and some things which are otherwise reserved solely for department directors, including routine policy level interaction with elected officials, the ability to independently manage administrative items in the city council agenda, the ability to independently approve invoices, and a limited ability to take some disciplinary action. The position is currently a grade 10 position. I am recommending that the job description be updated to show actual duties performed plus some additional duties and reclassified somewhere between G12 and G15. The pay grade that is ultimately chosen would be done so in consultation with the city attorney and with a human resources professional. The main issue to determine is whether the responsibilities meet the Fair Labor Standards Act definition of an exempt or salaried employee. Currently, the city's lowest exempt position is G15, and so Soren has some human resources background as well, and he would help me with that exempt test. You go through kind of a series of questions. Does the employee do this, 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 this? And if the answer is yes to any of these, then they're likely an exempt employee. So that's a lot of talk about positions, and I think I'm going to pause it there and give you a chance to ask questions about the positions we've been talking about.
Let's go ahead and let's go back to the first one, and that would be the immediate needs, and I believe the first one is the police department?
Finance was the first.
Correct. So the finance. Let's go ahead and talk about that first, and then we'll just go down the list. So any questions in regards to the finance? Councilmember Cole?
I've got nothing at this point.
Councilmember Juan?
I have no questions.
Councilmember Thorson?
Yeah, I guess my question is that, obviously, we're in a pretty competitive job market, and we were able to rely on your wife coming in and filling in this void that we've had. Is there any idea, or like she may fill this role and be a full-time employee, or is that?
Councilmember Thorson, no, that's a very good question. So, in all actuality, I've utilized my wife in the accountant role basically for bank reconciliations. So to date, she started in December. To date, she's worked approximately 91 hours, which has cost the city about $3,600, where we're saving approximately $12,500 a month without an accountant. What I see as my immediate need for 2022 is, and then this means in no disrespect for people who have been here in the city before, is that I can fill that role of the accountant. I just went through probably the toughest part that I'm going to, and that is getting prepared for the audit and going through the audit. And I think we got one more day of that. There'll be some follow-up questions, but we've been very successful. The team has really risen through that time period. What I can't endure is having some key personnel, meaning our utility person, Barb, or the person who's doing our payroll and accounts payable, Jackie, to walk out the door. We have no redundancies built to date. And so what I'm doing is for me personally, the easiest thing for me to do is to go out and hire an accountant right now. That's something that I'll look, maybe as we look at our prioritizations in 2023, we have a request in there for that. Eventually, it's something that is going to be necessary. But I need to build redundancies on a day-in, day-out basis to make sure that this city is in the best position that it possibly can be. Later on, I need to build the redundancies on the top in succession planning for myself and to make sure that we're covering both ways from bottom to top and making sure that how I look at it is that every job responsibility has a primary and secondary person. And we don't have, any gaps that are there in case something were to happen to an employee or they make a decision to retire. I think this is the best move right now where we're at, and I've been adamantly kind of pushing it since the fall time of last year. And I just think we have a very talented, dedicated staff right now. I want to keep them engaged. I want to make sure that our positions are being adequately compensated, which I don't believe they are today. And for me, again, from a very budgetary conservative way, I didn't want to increase the levy of 2022. And so this will actually save money. If an accountant is not, if we're not able to get one in 2023 budget, I may bring in an accountant on a temporary basis to help fill some of those gaps. But I need to go through this process of building this redundancy, do an assessment of how the staff is doing. There's going to be some additional functions for some of the individuals and making sure that they can handle those and build those redundancies. By the time we're really into developing the 2023 budget, I'll have a good gauge on whether the existing staff will be able to do that. But right now, I have been just utterly pleased. And I think that a number of individuals have been underutilized and have not been given the opportunity to really get to their full potential. But I have been seriously totally impressed with staff, and not to you know, not mention everybody's name, but you know, to have Barb and Jackie raise their bar that much higher. You know, I put in a number of extra hours through this audit period, but I could not have been as successful as I have, and those comments have come back from our auditors, if it wasn't for the staff and for their dedication. And so I think in 2022, this is the right move for us. Down the road, yes, I'm gonna have to look for an accountant, and I've talked to the city manager. I'm holding open that caveat that if it doesn't happen in 2023, that we could bring back in a temporary accountant to help through some of the busiest periods of the year. For that accountant who's been here, even though I am related to that person, I've never worked with that person before, I was totally amazed with their capabilities, and has really been very helpful for the city. Has really engaged with existing staff very, very well. And so all in all, coming in here and through the turnover that had occurred and then losing a key component like the accountant, we actually are doing pretty well. So yeah, I'm very pleased.
Well, I'm glad to hear that there's a lot of, you know, thinking into the future, and, you know, I think traditionally we've kind of been reactionary, and it's good to see that we're planning ahead for the future, like the things you're talking about, building some redundancies in these positions, and so that's good to hear.
In part of that, I'd like to also follow up is that I don't want to jump ahead and add an FTE at this point in time, because there may be some ways that we can reduce some tasks. We've looked in the past of the possibility of like contracting out for like our payroll services. You know, that's a very time-sensitive, time-consuming process. That may be something that we decide, hey, you know, we feel comfortable. We've already looked at a number of different systems. That may be something that we seriously want to move into instead of, you know, adding the staff components to it. But I think this reconfiguration will also give us an opportunity to develop a little bit more segregation of duties, and tighten up our internal controls a little bit more, where I think that we've been, you know, just because of the pure size that we haven't had in the past.
You got G7 and G8. They're going to be stepping up to G10. Those are the two positions. Are they trained to be the G10s, or you're going to need more training for these two individuals? More schooling? Are they already doing the work that a G10 is doing?
Yes, one of the positions, who oversees utilities, actually in the marketplace is quite a bit under market rate. If that individual were to retire, we would have a tough time hiring somebody at that rate that individual is doing. They currently are really overseeing, supervising two individuals. They, you know, I mean, our utilities are generating approximately $16 million a year. We have had no significant issues in a number of years. They've done an excellent job. As far as necessarily the education background, I think they make up for that just because of all the years of experience, and they've done a superb job. On the other side to it, the person who would have that other position is actually doing 85% of the finance coordinator's position to date. The biggest component that they're not doing is the bank reconciliations, which can't get that person there because they have too much on their plate. I need to build another person who right now, her name is Angie, who started in the city approximately a year ago. We're already training her into doing accounts payable. Now, with this approval, we can get the full push, and then that'll unload some of the job responsibilities that go along with that. So then, yeah, we can get her fully.
And not having the accountant person, who's doing those duties? Are they taking responsibility off some of the accountant, or is that totally falling on you?
It's kind of a split. They'll take a number of responsibilities, actually through the audit part to it. I've taken on more of the journal entering part to it. They review and approve on the system, so we have, the segregation of the duties. To me, I'm very comfortable, not forever, and that's where eventually, after we've done an assessment of how this comes, there may be a need for an accountant, and definitely for succession planning purposes.
But it sounds like the accountant was kind of during the audit cycle is kind of when they're needed the most, it sounded like, or
Absolutely.
maybe there is something that
Yeah, I mean,
could be a temporary or.
and that's really where, and that's where, I had come in, I think it was in December, and talked to the city council about my, kind of a temporary plan and trying to get the support. That's what I had seen, was that the push is gonna come through this audit, finishing up all the year end, and then there's quite a few work papers that we need to prepare for the auditors. And the auditors are really kind of an extension of the city. They're our team too. And so they've been fantastic to work with. But to be able to do that and to make that push, I needed to have some pieces that I could rely on somebody that had the knowledge, skills, and abilities, and had been there, done that, and that I truly trusted to be able to take that. So then it would allow me the time to really delve into, the accounting part, which has benefited the city greatly, because I know just about everything that's going on inside the financial world of the cities, and I had to learn on a crash course. So, so actually it is fit very well for my own learning style, and I think it's benefited the city greatly.
Okay, good. Any other questions for Finance Director? Not? Good job. Thank you. We'll move on to the Police Department. And any questions for Chief Bebenroth? Councilmember Cole?
No, no questions from what was presented. Just a follow-up question to how the hiring's going for the open positions. Are you getting anywhere?
It's a struggle. Every agency across the state and country is seeing the depleted applicant pools, so the numbers are down. We have 3 awesome folks that just started a week and a half ago now, so we were able to find 3 quality applicants, and then our pool is still open, so we're getting there. They're increasing from the last round, so that's what we like to see.
Well, and having a famous police chief doesn't hurt.
Right?
Right? Appreciate it.
Councilmember Wine?
As for the short term, I think that makes a lot of sense. I also appreciate some of the data and the information that you had included in there for the long term. I think that helps frame it up and, for us to consider when we come to budget. So I have no questions.
I know it's been a tough year and a half for police. Councilmember Thorson?
Yeah, just some comments. I mean, I support what you're proposing. I think, we need to acknowledge that, society's changing. It always is. I mean, at one point in time, I think we only had 1 or 2 officers in North St. Paul because it's all we needed. But that was a long time ago and different times. And, we want to make sure that, in reading your narrative that you shared with us, it's not good to hear people wanting to move out of town because of increasing crime, and there's not a simple solution. Hiring 3, 4, 5 more officers isn't going to change that. It's a bigger issue, but to ensure that our officers here could provide services to our residents and business owners, and that, safety and is the utmost concern that, investing more in the police department and public safety is kind of a no-brainer. How we finance that and pay for that, I think, I've kind of touched on that in the past in comments I've made when it comes to public safety and some of the things that our fire department does and the police department. There's potentially some crossover there, but, that's another discussion we can have at another time. But as far as hiring more officers go, I've shared that same frustration and the fact that we've had 17 sworn officers approved, but we've just never been able to hit that. And it's for a lot of different reasons. And it just is getting harder and harder now with the last 2-3 years that's gone on that, who wants to be a police officer kind of idea if you're coming out of high school. It's kind of it's not as a popular field choice as it once was back in the, several years ago. But personally, I support what you're proposing, and, we'll trust in the city manager and finance to make it happen.
Thank you.
I think the newspaper article was a big deal. Changing the narrative, and I think that's kind of what we're trying to accomplish here is change the narrative. And it is good to be a police officer, and it's good to be a community officer. And I think North St. Paul, we have a lot to offer here. We got a great chief, we got a great police force, so I hope we have, 100 applicants rather than a handful. So, I agree with the narrative here, what Councilmember Thorson said also, that, but I do look forward to, discussion, this summer in regards to the next budget cycle, in regards to what are those needs, how do we even help you even more if we can.
Appreciate it.
So,
Thank you.
anything else for Chief? If not, we'll move on to the Community Development and Community Service Director. Go to Councilmember Cole.
At this point, I have no questions. I think I'll have a lot come summer. You're no matter what, there needs. My opinion is you're still understaffed with only adding one position. And my assumption is coming forward with the ask that is put forth is that the current budget can't afford to bring on an additional person.
Correct.
Okay. So it's a Band-Aid, but we're not, so, okay.
Baby steps is maybe a good way of saying it.
Councilmember Wong.
I have no questions.
Councilmember Thorson.
Yeah, this is something I think, we're all aware of, that one person can't do the job of 3, 4, 5, 6 people. It's setting that person up to fail, and it's setting our organization up to fail. The community development, community service director position, I guess my concern is that in the past when we've had these individuals in these roles, it's real kind of focused on just one area. We used to have a EDA director, and they only did EDA types of things. Whereas, their need here is to do those things, but also community development types of things. And I think that actually the last person we had, that's their title switched from just exclusively being EDA, involved in the EDA, paid out of the EDA, to a community development type person that was involved in other things, but they may not have had that experience. So maybe it was the wrong person that we had to fill that role. But so, I like the idea of keeping it open in kind of that dual role and kind of refining it based on the applicants. But, I don't know how, we're talking about succession planning and what's gone on the last year and a half. I think we've seen, maybe at some point, we need to talk, sooner than later, is a role of an assistant city manager appropriate? And what roles would that individual fill? Kind of, I'm sure EDA, community development, those sorts of things, maybe that's a better solution. And again, that's a different type of candidate or different person, different pay raise or pay scale, but, I'm open to, suggestions and discussion, but, what you're proposing here, I'm perfectly comfortable with and supporting, so.
I would agree that, this is definitely a need because you can only do so much. But one area that, and I know we've talked about it, is the Parks and Rec area that I think we really are short on. And if there's a way that one of these positions, can take on more of that role, I see that, part of it is, but I think that our residents are crying for some sort of, programming out there within our parks. I don't know if the schools are up to par with that yet or not. I'm not sure. As we get out of COVID and as we get into the kids getting out into the public and into the parks and, programming and that type of thing, it'd be nice to have that type of position. And also, as we look into the future of the community center too, as part of that discussion.
And I do think a Parks and Recreation person is a huge need, based on what I've heard from the community. I just don't have a good funding source for it right now.
So we'll move on, unless there's anything else on that, we'll move to the deputy clerk, and if she can leave the building while we talk about her, that'd be great. I'm just kidding. We'll talk about that position. Councilmember Cole,
I support it. I have nothing.
Councilmember Wong,
Same.
Councilmember Thorson.
Yeah, it makes sense, and I'm supportive of it.
Yep, and I'm the same, and she's got the best smell in her office. She's got one of those, what do you call it, Febreze air fresheners, and it's like, oh my gosh. So, and again, I think this is something that, is coming out of COVID, coming out of, things that the job duty is more than what has been, what you signed up for. I think there is more than what there is there, so.
Well, and Finance Director Winnick talked about some of his employees and their potential. In this case, I again, since the deputy clerk can't leave the room, she has to just be embarrassed. I do believe that the individual has a great deal of potential and has identified a lot of future career steps. Quite frankly, at an age where a lot of people are comfortable staying put, or a place in her career where a lot of people are comfortable staying put, she does have a lot of interest in getting certifications in both city clerk kinds of things and in human resources kinds of things. And so I'm so supportive of that. And, my hope is that as the deputy clerk grows professionally, we can always accommodate her here, so that she doesn't have to move on to practice those skills somewhere else.
Is there more training involved
Yes.
then?
Yep.
I'm assuming that,
Well, there's more training involved in future steps. I think to take the step I'm talking about today, again, I'll know more when I talk with I've talked to one human resources consultant already, and based on, a hour-long conversation, their conclusion was, yeah, this position's under a place too low in the pay scale, and without any changes in training or job description or anything, they ought to be, it ought to be higher. But I'll continue to have those conversations with the HR consultant to get this kind of dialed in right and get some outside perspective. It gets harder to be objective as you get closer to an organization of the people inside. So to have an outside set of eyes take a look at things too.
And again, all this fits into our 2022
It does.
budget, so it's a good thing. All right,
So, just to continue on, I wanted to just make sure we're kind of on the same page in terms of who has authority to do what, or what my authority as city manager is. The state statutes and city code make some of our roles for city staffing very clear. It's clear that the council's role is to approve a levy and a budget that includes expenditures on personnel. It's very clear that anything related to the individual filling that position, hiring, supervision, discipline, falls under the authority of the city manager. There are a lot of responsibilities, though, that are really undefined in the state statutes or city code. Past practice of the city council is to identify the size and titles of the staff of each department. I would anticipate we'd continue with that practice. On the titles in the future, we might give it a little, some of the titles a little more ambiguity, so we have a little more ability to be nimble as hiring needs come up, but we'll talk about that when the time comes. There are some things, I've spoken with a lot of my peers and a couple of mentors about these roles, and I just give four bullets here of things which are typically granted to a city manager, and I wanted to make sure that those are roles you feel comfortable me fulfilling. One is drafting and editing the responsibilities contained within a position's job description. Two would be filling an approved position with a lower graded position if the situation warrants, or in order to give an almost qualified employee a chance to grow into the approved position. That last piece is something I really believe in, is allowing employees an opportunity to grow. A lot of times if we do have a position that's a G whatever, let's say it's a G10, if we can find a qualified G8 person that can come in and learn the position there and grow into it, that just, in my experience, works out really well. Three, the designation of working out of class where appropriate or required by labor contracts. Most of our labor contracts discuss this. They might all, but at least 3 out of the 5 do, that if a person's doing the responsibilities of a higher position, that they should be recognized for that, at least on a temporary basis. It doesn't say this in here, but the nature of working out of class is that it's meant to be temporary, typically a year or less. And so you would either have to address it in a budget to make it permanent, or find some other way of reducing that employee's responsibilities to make sure that you're not asking them to do more than you're paying them to do. And then finally, the hiring of temporary employees or contract employees, as long as it's within my spending authority, which is currently $25,000. So if these are roles you feel comfortable in me having, that kind of dictates what next steps are.
do you still do job reviews? I mean, are we doing those? Is this
No.
part of that, or?
We have not been. In the organization, so we've talked about that at the department directors meeting. One of the long-term employees indicated that he believes maybe he's had one in 20 years. And I think there are varying opinions on performance evaluations, whatever you want to call them. I have my personal opinion. I think that they're a good tool when they're done right. If it's something an employee dreads, if it's like, oh my gosh, my annual review's coming up, this is the worst day of the year, then one of two things is happening. Either you're not doing performance evaluations the right way, or there have been unaddressed problems for the prior 364 days that should have been addressed along the way. And so my goal would be to make sure, if there are performance or discipline issues, that they're addressed when they happen and not at the performance evaluation, and that B, a performance evaluation is a positive tool for both people involved. When I do performance evaluations for my employees in the past, it's a two-way thing. They evaluate me, as a supervisor, I evaluate them. And it's not really about them, it's about the position, whether they have the tools that they need, the resources that they need to do their job, what's going well, what's not going well. So I think what we agreed to as department directors as a starting point is in 2022, exempt employees, and there are only 8 exempt employees in the organization, will be doing an annual review, and then kind of getting back together and talking about how those reviews went, whether we thought that it was a good tool, how we could do it differently, so that I want all the department directors to feel like they're good tools that they can get behind. And so, it's not a democracy, but I hope we can get to where everybody's on the same page, and I think we can.
I think a job review is different from a 1-year, 2-year, 3-year employee.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're talking about the job, maybe I took us on a different road than you had meant to go down. Like the job description, reviewing that on a regular basis.
Something similar, yep.
Yeah, and I believe that a major evaluation was done in North St. Paul somewhere in the neighborhood of 2017, where they went through and looked at job descriptions, went through and looked at people's places in the pay scale, made some adjustments. We're an unusual organization in that we have like 55 full-time employees, only 3 of whom are not represented by a union. The unions do a pretty good job of letting us know when their employees aren't being recognized for the work that they're doing. And so at least that direction, if we're under recognizing what an employee's doing in terms of their job description, we hear about it. In terms of systematically going through, like I said, the last time that happened was 2017. That can be an expensive process. So at some point in time, I can get an idea of what the expense is, and we can get on a schedule maybe to do it not as an entire organization all in 1 year, but to have it rolling, where each department goes once a year, and every 5 years, then every department gets looked at.
I think we did talked about 2 different things here.
Yeah,
So I was talking
did.
about the first one, still was on that one. Just that, someone, a new person coming in, a 1-year review, is different than someone like Ron who's been here, 40 years, 50 years? I think that it's a little different type of review because they've been here for so long, and someone new coming in
I think
needs more of a in-depth review.
100% agree that it's different. I believe they're both important. I would like to sit down with Ron and talk about what's working great for him, how I can help him better, all of those things. So I think all of the above is the answer.
Yep, I would agree. Councilmember Thorson.
Yeah, I respect your opinion on that. My personal opinion on these, whether you call them performance reviews or annual reviews or whatever, is that they've never happened here and they need to happen. And the reason why I say that is because in the last 2 years, maybe even going back 3 years, we've had several employees that have left, that have came forward with a lawsuit. And, we can talk about not the specifics, but the fact that it happened. And some of the things were that it was difficult to proceed with a lawsuit because there was nothing in the file about, anything in the past, even though there potentially were issues, but they were not documented, And I think you shared an example at the business association that, you walked around half the day with spinach in your teeth and no one told you. And, when you have spinach in your teeth, you want someone to say something. This isn't to me, I don't look at it as, well, look, I'm the boss here, everyone answers to me, and every year we have a performance evaluation, I'm gonna tell you everything you're doing wrong. That's not it at all. But if you have an employee who's got spinach in your teeth, someone needs to say something. And if that employee is purposely putting the spinach in their teeth, you need to tell them to stop, and you need to document it, that, we told him that this isn't acceptable behavior. And then that follows along, where if in the future it progresses to a termination, and we've seen it can happen, they turn around and sue, and then we're left with, well, we've got no case here, because even though this employee was doing these things, we haven't documented it. So to me, it seems like it's just more of a function of necessity, and that, you know, I think naturally people are just gonna be afraid of a performance evaluation anyway, but like you say, you can run it any way you want. It shouldn't be a negative thing, it should be a positive thing. And that it's just as simple as, you know, going over your strengths and weaknesses and things you can work on, and, you know, and like you say, it's, you do treat an employee who's been here for 1, 2, 3 years, maybe you treat everyone the same, but you treat the questioning or the evaluation criteria a little differently than someone who's been here for 40 years. But maybe it's some of that stuff that they've been here for so long, they're not doing the little things again, and they just need a friendly reminder. So that's where I see these things as a valuable tool, and that's something that traditionally has not gone on here for whatever reason, that needs to start, and we'll just trust your judgment on how you're gonna implement that.
Well, thank you. And my goal is that we're going to have, let's say we have 60 FTEs here, that we're going to have 60 absolutely awesome employees. And I believe that right now to be the case. And when we have annual talks with employees to tell them how awesome they are, my goal is that they're going to say, can we do this monthly? And that's where I'd like to get to. And we'll see.
So everybody kind of agree with the approvals for and implementation of personal changes for the city manager? Councilmember Cole, Wong,
Yes.
Thorson? Okay. And from that, I think we're on to our next topic, or unless.
Well, I'll just go through the recommended action really quick. You know, if you're okay with my role, we can implement the finance department reorganization tomorrow morning, as far as I know, or the next pay period, because all of those things fall within what we've agreed kind of as the city manager role. And then we'll come back as soon as possible, probably in the first meeting in April. I can't see why it wouldn't be, to amend the 2021 budget. It's going to be a short staff report to include kind of this augmented position. 2022, thank you, budget, the current year budget for this. And then I'm going to bring aboard a consultant to help us look at a couple of existing positions and determine whether they're appropriately placed in the pay scale. And then at the same time, or as we come back with the police position, or maybe 2 weeks later, depending on the timing, I'll come back with a revision to the 2022 budget if needed for the community development director to add that position in, and then we'll get rock and rolling on advertising.
And you need to talk to Ron sooner than later.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you for your support on this.
And then,
The next item, I think we're going to ask City Engineer Dolly to walk us through.
welcome, Morgan.
Welcome, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I think it's appropriate.
I was with one of your colleagues the other day at the League of, or not the Regional of Mayors. We had Eric there, was talking.
He did a presentation.
And he
I heard.
did a
Yeah. Hopefully he
presentation.
did an okay job.
Did a good job.
Okay, good. So this item before you at the workshop level here, and I think it's appropriate that I'm sitting at Finance Director Winnick's table. It's not necessarily a joint item. I certainly will be presenting it, but it does relate to things that that he is looking at with respect to preparing for bonding for capital improvement projects. And this is a good opportunity for staff to, because this is a comprehensive year with multiple projects. Normally, we would report back to council as we're going out for bids, for example. Here's the latest cost estimate, or here are the bids, and they were good bids, et cetera. We've got multiple projects with multiple moving pieces, so this is a good, important time to take a look at the entire picture There's some ups, there's some downs. I'll explain that, and certainly, hopefully, we have a little bit of time for questions, maybe some direction from council. Maybe Dan's got something to add. We didn't rehearse this, so. But what I would like to point your attention to would be the table that I included in the packet here. It's just very simple. This is an internal tool that Dan and I have been using in Public Works as well to just kind of track the different funding categories, knowing that we've got CIP or streets dollars that impact the general levy. We've got other enterprise funds such as sanitary sewer, water, surface water, utility funds, which pay for portions of projects. We also, on this particular year, have some project costs that are incurred that are specific to street maintenance. So Public Works' maintenance overlay budget is something that's being brought to bear here. And as you may recall, last time we discussed this series of 2022 capital improvements. That was about September, October timeframe. We were looking at CIP estimates, which are more high-level estimates. We're looking at a map of the whole city. We're measuring these projects on the basis of length and width and approximate general costs, knowing what, at a high level, we're looking at with respect to streets and utilities. And sometimes we try to build in contingencies or additional amounts to take into account the fact that we don't know all the information at that time. But as we do dig into things, we do find some additional information, or sometimes there's outside influences that change things, which I'll get into it. So the first item that I'll point out is certainly a positive outcome, and that is that for the first project, and that's the general project that we're calling 2022 Street and Utility Improvement Project, we did take bids on that. That is actually in front of the council on the regular agenda tonight here for consideration of award of contract, but the bids did come in favorably, and basically, if you look at the second to last column in the table, that is, it's labeled Delta from CIP, so that's kind of trying to track on what has changed since last fall. That were about 10% to the green, I guess, in terms of what we were projecting. And that is what we strive to do, right? We strive to have our estimates be conservative such that when we do take bids, hopefully if the market cooperates with us, the numbers are going down. That's the idea. Now, if you keep moving down in the column there, the next project that is identified is the Cooperative venture with the city of Maplewood, where they're doing most of their project, and we're going to be participating just on Ariel Street there, which is jointly owned road between North St. Paul and Maplewood. As you may recall, there's a past discussion regarding potential pedestrian facilities on that street. Council direction was to consider an alternate, so it's not for sure that the council has accepted that alternate or has directed that that sidewalk be constructed, right? But I've included that on as an additional potential cost, I guess, for future consideration. So that is certainly part of the overall puzzle or equation that we're trying to track on here. I think that the next one down is probably the most impactful. The next one down is the 7th Avenue project. And so that is basically from where the 7th Avenue Improvements Project left off in 2020, and then moving west to First Street, which is approximately where the other project left off. So in effect, filling that gap with a street reconstruction of concrete pavement on 7th Avenue. But also, when the original map was kind of delineated with some past staff, we had included, the idea was to include part of 4th Avenue between Helen Street and Margaret, and part of the alleyway there too as well. And so, as you can see, it's a fairly substantial increase in our estimate based on really diving in and trying to pull at all of the things that are underground there, frankly. One driver on that cost increase is concrete pavement. So the pavement on 7th Avenue is certainly increased in price in terms of more recent cost estimates or what we're seeing in the market right now than in the past. We've also included that portion of Margaret Street where the 2020 project left off mid-block, and we've brought that concrete all the way down to the intersection of 4th and Margaret in this current estimate. We also have a 1960s 88-inch arch corrugated metal culvert, which has never been maintained, which, again, high-level estimate versus digging into the details. These are the things that we find out. And that is a very expensive, I mean, that's a pipe that you can almost drive through. You could certainly walk through it, but it's a very big pipe that conveys a large portion of stormwater under 7th Avenue, and it's in Helen Street. So that is a big driver of cost. As I mentioned in the notes on the table there, you know, it was started out as a big scope. That scope can be reduced. There's options out there. It's not too late to consider those. It also says something about value options with respect to rehab the storm sewer rather than reconstruct. Since this was written, I've been talking to Public Works about it. We're probably a little uncomfortable with the risk that even if that corrugated metal pipe was rehabbed, since it's 1960s vintage, there's very likely holes in that pipe that have just rusted through. So if we were to do that, that might add a little more risk to the city than staff might be comfortable with. But again, by reducing scope, you know, it may be possible to reduce this down by $1 million potentially, but you know, we're not saying that we have to do that, but again, that's an alternative that is out there, certainly for consideration. And then the next big one is something that's outside forces, out of our control to a certain extent. So that project is the Mcknight water main. So we talked about in advance of Ramsey County overlaying Mcknight Road, taking care of the city's water main, which lies underneath the county road, which has been prone to breaks. And as you can see in the map, which is also in the packet, and the original CIP, based on past conversations with Ramsey County staff, we had identified that stretch of road on Mcknight from Beam all the way up to County Road D, which is actually mostly, if not all, in the city of Maplewood. But as you know, the city of North St. Paul does supply portions of Maplewood with drinking water. And so that is our water main there. So that was the original CIP estimate. So since then, and certainly it's their right to do so, but Ramsey County has expanded the scope of their overlay project to be from County Road D on the north end all the way down to 11th Avenue. So that essentially doubles the length of their overlay project. And if the city were to take care of all the water main under that section, that certainly doubles or more than doubles, just because it's a little bit longer than half the length of the cost of that project. So that's certainly a changing factor. Now, Ramsey County has, they listened to our request previously by pushing the overlay back. They were originally going to do that in 2022. They said they would push it back to 2023. They would probably be open to hearing from the city if we wanted to push it back further. But bottom line, in talking to Public Works, that section from 11th Avenue north to Beam Avenue is actually worse with respect to past history of water main breaks and of greater concern. So if we were to, for example, just take care of the part that we were originally taking care of on the north end from Beam to County Road D, and you know, decided we wanted to live with the risk and just leave that section from 11th to Beam as is, and the county overlaid the road, Public Works staff and myself feel that very likely we would certainly experience some water main breaks there and have to dig up the county road to fix them, which would not be ideal after the county's investment in overlaying that roadway pavement. So those are the other changes are relatively minor, but it is a significant number. We've separated that out so that Dan can see what those look like with respect to the different funding sources. Dan has also had meetings with the bonding consultant. I haven't been a part of those, so there may be some information there. But certainly with that, we have certainly ample time for questions. So I'll stand for any questions council might have at this time.
So that column Delta for CIP, that's the increase of the projects?
Yeah, so it's showing
So 2.7,
an aggregate increase. We did have some decreases, but you add it all together, it's an aggregate increase, correct?
so if we were to do all the projects, that's the increase from what was presented before?
Correct, included in the fall of 2021 CIP estimate.
Okay. Any questions for Morgan, Councilmember Cole?
Maybe not so much questions as clarification. The sidewalk along Ariel, I believe you said you were bidding out. Did we agree on what to do with 13th? Did we agree to have that bid out it's a major east-west?
I think we had that as an alternative.
So the overlay of 13th is actually included in the maintenance overlay, if I remember correctly.
But we had a whole lot of sidewalk conversations one night, and I'm just trying to remember what we had talked about.
So what I have right now is because that was an overlay and not something that we're kind of doing a little bit more on, moving the curb or getting into the curb line, for example, no pedestrian facilities on 13th at this time.
Okay. I mean, does it hurt to ask for bids? Or the bid's already gone out? And
Bids
if
on that
if
one?
I'm a sole one up here, then that's fine.
You're
We
right.
can move on.
So bids have gone out.
Okay.
That contract is in front of the council for award. It's certainly something that staff can continue to look at to see if there's a cost-effective way to retrofit that in.
And then same
Again,
with,
that's just an overlay.
On 13th, right.
but nothing will be done for another 20 years. So I'm not necessarily aligned with the city's direction on, when we have conversations on sidewalks or not. That's why I'm asking, because it could be another 20 to 30 years before anything is done on that stretch. So that's why I wanted to bring it up now. Also, same question exists on 7th. I close my eyes and I can't remember what it looks like up there. Sidewalk runs all the way on one side, correct?
On 7th Avenue?
Yep.
In the section that we're talking about with this project, it's on both sides.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Wong,
I have nothing, thanks.
Councilmember Thorson.
Well, we've just got ourselves in such a bad spot right now from deferring this stuff for so long, and I'm talking decades. I mean, this should have been adopted in the early 70s, working our way towards this, but we are where we are. But when I hear, we're trying to coordinate with the county to minimize the impacts of a Mcknight Road because of the water mains, and, it's just, meanwhile, that road continues to get worse, right? And so if we can only do one section and they redo the whole road and it pushes the water mains back farther, they're still gonna blow up the road, we're still gonna have to tear up the road, so it's kinda, like we're chasing our tail. And, sidewalks are always gonna be an issue, especially when there's non-existing sidewalks. To me, we just gotta look at it as a case-by-case basis. Does it make sense? Does it make sense to put a sidewalk in a cul-de-sac? No. But I'm sure there are people that would argue that it would benefit the neighborhood and that, they would wanna see it. Does it make sense to put sidewalks on main arterial roads where there's a lot of traffic and a lot of pedestrian traffic? Yes, absolutely. But I think it's just important we stick to these plans and, deferring projects for things like, like sidewalks, to me, it's just counterproductive and it's just gonna compound the issue because if a road is to the point where it needs to be replaced, but the hangup is a sidewalk and we just move on to the next area and that just continues to get worse. I mean, worst case scenario, you can redo the road and people can walk on the road absent of a sidewalk, even though perhaps in 20 years, the road will be rescheduled for a full overlay, and that is when accommodations will be made for a sidewalk.
Are you talking about aerial or?
Well, just, this 13th Avenue, I mean, I get it's an overlay, and I understand why that sidewalks weren't in there, and if, Councilmember Cole, and he's talked to constituents that have expressed interest in a sidewalk. I'm not against bringing that in, but, we're looking at these costs and they pile up quick. And, I'm looking at it from the bigger picture. What's more important, that you know, 13th Avenue between Mcknight and Ariel, I would argue is not heavily, there's not a lot of traffic other than localized residents going to and from compared to Mcknight Road. You know, it's a main arterial road, there's all sorts of traffic. If we're trying to decide where do we allocate our resources between fixing a water main and putting in a sidewalk and a non-arterial road, I mean, I'm gonna side with the water main all day. It just makes sense. But, you know, that's putting us in a position to have to prioritize something like a water main versus a sidewalk. And, you know, certainly arguments can be made either way. But, you know, from what I'm looking at here, what you guys are proposing, I mean, my concern is just when I hear, you know, when the county's ready to redo like a stretch of Mcknight, that's gotta be a pretty big area, right? Are they talking just in North St. Paul, or is it spanning all through North St. Paul into Maplewood? And then if we're asking them to hold off on that because we've got plans to do more water main repair, but we can't afford it, you know what I'm saying? It's like we're now negatively impacting all sorts of people that live on Mcknight, that travel on Mcknight, even though ideally we would just redo all the water main, right? But we can't do that. We have to do it in parts and pieces. So we can't avoid this issue of the county wants to do a deal and we want to try to do what's best, but, you know, because we're just pushing something off and we can't predict water main breaks. But it sounds like, from what I'm hearing you explain, if we continue to push this off in respect to preserve that overlay that they're doing, we're just moving it down the road farther, right? Does that make sense? So, I mean, I guess I'm not supportive of asking the county to delay a road project that they have, you know, especially that it's gonna cost more money and, you know, I don't know what, there's no good solution to this, right? We can't replace all the water main break in one fell swoop. We have to kind of focus on the worst areas and hope for the best.
Councilmember Thurston, we've had multiple pretty bad water main breaks on Mcknight, and I mean, they've been some of the worst ones that since I've been here, where it drains the water tower like in a half hour. So, you know, when they extended this, you know, on
It's a lot of water.
it is a lot of water, like, you know, 350,000 gallons in a half hour. So, you know, doubling the water main on here, it's something that I feel that, you know, when they're doing it, that we kind of have to do. And also, when we have those breaks on a county road, how we deal with them versus our regular roads, we have to, you know, we dig them, we fix them. They're in the winter time normally. We have to concrete them in for the winter. Then we have to go back, dig them back out, dig out that concrete, and then there's a road spec that we have to build that road back to. So these water main breaks get fairly expensive when they're on a county road. So when there's an opportunity like this to do that, or when they're doing that, I think it's important that we do focus on that, you know, versus other things. And I know that, like you said, there's needs for lots of different things that, you know, need to be done, but something like this, you know, I feel that it's important, and it's in the best interest of the city, I think, in the long run, and the money spent for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to clarify, that's what I'm fully supportive of focusing on the water main repair and allowing the county to redo the road, you know, sooner rather than continue to delay that, because I think that is having the largest impact on the greatest amount of people versus, you know, I think we kind of can get sidetracked on, you know, sidewalk discussion and things like that, so.
Am I hearing the county is gonna be doing this project, so we have the opportunity to replace that? So it's already gonna be done.
It's in their 5-year CIP.
So as they do it, then we would be able to replace, is that where,
Yes.
or are we
So
talking?
so the timing is, so what Ramsey County does for these pavement preservation projects that they do every year on an annual basis is they let and award a contract to a contractor to do several streets, county highways throughout the county. And they've they have similar to how we identify and prioritize different streets, they have their own map and it's scheduled out. And so they, one of their segments for 2023 is this from 11th Avenue up to County Road D, which is in Maplewood. So a big chunk of this is outside of North St. Paul, but our North St. Paul water main is under that section of Mcknight, even as a county road in Maplewood. And so the timing is that we would award our water main project this summer. We would get a contractor out there this late summer and fall, and they'd do as much as they could this year. I mean, if they were able to get it all done in 1 year, that would be great, although it's very likely that they would have to come back to finish the water main in the first part of 2023. And then Ramsey County has indicated that they would coordinate with us if we had some work in 2023 such that the city water main work would finish. And then because their contractor is actually going all through the whole county, doing their overlay work through the whole summer, when they get to Mcknight, that would be scheduled a little bit later in the summer such that they'd be doing their overlay work after we were already done and out of there with our water main stuff.
So my concern was that he had mentioned that they were already proposing to do this project, the road. I'm assuming it's a mill and overlay, because if it was a full reconstruction, it would be no issue. They would just say, hey, we're opening up the road, get in here, now's the time to do it. I mean, I guess we could say no, and we could say, well, we don't have the money to do it, but that would be a ridiculous thing to do. So my concern was that if we're continuing to ask like the county to delay this project because we've reprioritized, which we haven't done, but if we do shift from what we haven't planned here, that's where my concern is that, well, now we're asking them to change their plans because for whatever reasons, we've changed ours, and in the meantime, we're still gonna have water main breaks. So even though they put that new road down, we're still gonna have to tear into it. So it's just not really accomplishing anything by asking them to defer it. But I agree with the approach that if we can coordinate it and get it done, great.
I wasn't recommending that we delay it, but just putting all the options out there.
Okay.
But you're correct. If any capital expenditure, especially with the way prices are going, they're not getting any cheaper. So, doing something later is going to cost more dollars than doing it.
Margaret, you said 11th to County Road D? So I'm seeing,
11th County Road D, correct.
so this blue line, this arrow that's going straight up, is that on Mcknight then?
Yes.
So 11th,
So the blue line is what we had in the CIP. That's where we started.
yep,
Now, what they're planning on doing
is going all the way up to,
is starting at 11th, which is significantly
starting on
south,
11th.
yeah.
Got it, got it,
and
got
then
it.
going north to County Road D, which is County Road D, I don't have a map to show it, but it's right before you get to 694.
And then you want to know whether or not we want to use that alternate two for the sidewalk? That's in here.
I don't know that we're asking for direction on this. Well, I guess if the 13th Avenue, that would be a new direction.
That'd be a
So
new
certainly
direction.
I'll take that direction if the council wants to have us, even though the contract's been awarded, we can look at options and see if there's, like I said, I think the way I would put it is there a cost-effective way? Maybe it doesn't even have to be a sidewalk. Is there a pedestrian shoulder, or is there something that can be looked at that can be considered a pedestrian facility on that road?
So the alternate in here for Ariel Street for the sidewalk? We're not, you don't-
That direction's already been given to staff. Maplewood's bids will be back in April, and so
got it.
at that time, I'll have some prices to present to council, and council will make the decision on the sidewalk at that time.
Okay. And I'm assuming 13th Avenue, the sidewalk, that's a pond, or that's a walking, potentially could be a walking circle eventually. So that is potentially, I think people do use that. I see on the grass there, you see a path on the grass that people use. So, and you need direction tonight on that, or should we?
Well, just to kind of give you a little bit more information, so we're starting to get prepared to get ready to bond for the projects. So I love the discussion. I think we're all in favor that we want to continue with this scope. We're looking at about a $12 million. So the first step that we have to do is we have to publish a notice for a public hearing. Our notice will go out Friday. And we'll have a public hearing on April 5th at 6:30. We are gonna go out right now for the full $12 million for bonding. That'll set the maximum limit that we can bond for. We certainly can come down. Part of that April 5th hearing will also give some different looks at options of we do have some money. We've got the ARPA funds. We also have we have our own maintenance, street maintenance funds that were approved through the CIP. So we'll show what that cost is going to be in comparison to what we were looking at before. So we'll have that prepared on that April 5th. But I am very excited to hear that we want to keep moving forward, in spite of the increases in the costs, and we just hope that the bids come in good. I mean, I think we're timing-wise, two different things. Morgan said it. Inflation is hitting us. The costs are going to continue to go up. We also, from a timing point of view, we got the feds looking at continuously raising interest rates.
Rates are going up.
We got to get out there and take these good bond rates that are out there right now. So we
Okay.
very pleased.
Any other questions then for Morgan? Not? City Manager Stark?
I don't have anything more for the workshop.
Okay, so at this time, I just want to mention to the council that I'm going to formally say that I'm not going to be running for mayor for this upcoming election. So just let everybody know that if you have candidates or know anybody that needs or would like to run for city council or mayor, but I want to make that announcement tonight formally to the council. So that's it. At this time, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Thorson,
Second.
second by Councilmember Wong. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. And we'll start the meeting now. No, let's take a 2-minute, 3-minute break.
I'll believe that on August, whatever,